Welcome back to the Social Gambler Radio Hour. I'm John Arnett. 794-9001, the number if you'd like to join the program today, 794-9001. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. Loads of fresh, updated daily content on the Social Gambler. New stuff every day. Everything's completely free. There's also an app for your smartphone. Now, I've told you before, you can get all your free advice from the Social Gambler. The only place here in Northeast Florida where you can legally act on that advice is at the Jacks Are Better Casino, which is, of course, the casino ship that leaves 9 times weekly, Wednesday through Sunday, out of Mayport. St. Augustine residents, if you do not know, I will tell you, there is a free shuttle every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. Leaves the Ramada Inn out on Highway 16 at 9 in the morning, 9:15 I think to be exact. Get you up there in time for the 11 o'clock cruise. That cruise will get in at about 4 o'clock. You'll get on the shuttle, take you right back down to your car. Then, you can get home and tell your wife what a tough day at work it was. That shuttle is completely free, but you do need reservations if you want space. 372-4220 is their reservation number. That's 372-4220. And when you make reservations or any time you're going to go out there to the Jacks Are Better, be sure to tell them you heard about them right here. Mention this radio show, the Social Gambler Radio Hour, and they will give you $10 free play. That is $10 you can use same as cash anywhere in the casino. That is a great deal, so be sure to check them out at the Jacks Are Better Casino. Some college football news today. The ACC and the Orange Bowl have announced they've come to an agreement on a new 12-year contract. That means for the next 12 years, the ACC champion, just as they have the past several years, unless they're involved in this new 14 playoff, will play in the Orange Bowl. Now, if the ACC champion is involved in the 14 playoff, then the Orange Bowl will take the next highest ranked team from the ACC. So there will be an ACC team in the Orange Bowl, aside from the years that the Orange Bowl does host a semifinal game, because the Orange Bowl is going to be in that rotation. Remember, it's going to be a 6-bowl rotation for the 2 national semifinal games. Now we know what 5 of those bowls are going to be. They're going to be the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl, the Fiesta Bowl, and the new Champions Bowl, which are going to be hosted in Jerry World out there in Dallas, Texas, and will pit the champions of the SEC and Big 12. Those are going to be 5 of the bowls that are in the rotation for the national semifinals. The 6th city, we don't know yet. Could be here in Jacksonville, even though, curiously, I actually heard Rick Catlett, who is, of course, the president of the Gator Bowl Association, heard him make an argument against that, why that would be worse. He was saying he thinks somehow it would be worse for the Gator Bowl to be in that 6-bowl rotation. Now, I didn't think it made much sense, but his argument was this, that, it would be great those couple of years where you had a relevant game, where you had one of the 2 playoff games. So if you were one of the 6 rotations, if the years you hosted the national semifinals, that would be great. But he was saying the other years, being part of the BCS, even though they're not going to call it that, but those 6 bowls, there'll be a committee that also decides who plays in those 6 bowls. Of course, they're the contracts now, like this one, the ACC just signed with the Orange Bowl, but those 6 bowls aren't going to get to invite whoever they want. So Catlett sounded concerned that the Gator Bowl would often be would be stuck with matchups like Boise State, TCU. A lot of times when you look at these BCS games the last few years, if you look at the very worst game, that's not a very good game. The game where the small school who is undefeated plays the Big East champ, the Utah-Pittsburgh games. I think they played a couple of times. So Catlett said a preferable scenario for him would be for a city like Atlanta, in the Peach Bowl, or the Chick-fil-A Bowl, whatever they call it now. If they were to get in there as one of the 6 bowls, that means they would forfeit their spot. See, right now the Chick-fil-A Bowl, they get to select a team from the SEC. I believe they either get the 3rd or 4th selection from the SEC. The Gator Bowl selects after them, either 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that. So the Gator Bowl these last, couple of years, been left with teams like a terrible Florida team or Mississippi State, and they'll also get sort of an also-ran. Catlett was saying he would think it'd be better for the Gator Bowl overall if they were just bumped up in that SEC pecking order if they all of a sudden got the third or fourth choice from the SEC every year. That way they may never have a national semifinal game, but every year they'll have a game that fans in this area are interested in, because this, Jacksonville is SEC country, let's face it. I'll include St. Augustine in that. Pete, St. Augustine resident Pete, gets offended slightly when I include St. Augustine as part of Jacksonville, greater Jacksonville. I say any place, when you turn on the local news, that's Jacksonville's local news, that means it's greater Jacksonville. Now, I may soon be a St. Augustine resident myself. My wife and I are looking at a couple of places down here after the show today. Currently live in Jacks Beach. You never know. Maybe once I start living down here, if that happens, I'll take offense too when they refer to it as greater Jacksonville or whatever. Interesting thing about this agreement between the ACC and the Orange Bowl, one of the byproducts of this new playoff system in college football, and the committee selects the teams, was supposed to be the elimination of the quote-unquote AQ conferences. Now, AQ means automatic qualifier conferences. There have been 6 leagues: SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, Big East, have been the 6 automatic qualifying conferences for the last several years, meaning the champion of those conferences gets a bid into the BCS. Now, we've seen some Big East champs and some ACC champs who, quite frankly, might not be deserving of a big bowl game, but because they won those conferences and those were the so-called big conferences, they got an automatic spot. Now, there are no longer any such thing as AQ conferences, supposedly. But after the ACC's new announced deal, 5 of the 6 conferences that were formerly called AQ conferences now have contractual tie-ins to bowls. The Big 10 and the Pac-12 will continue to play in the Rose Bowl when the Rose Bowl is not the site of national semifinal. The SEC and Big 12 this offseason agreed to now play in the Champions Bowl. That's right. The winner of the SEC will no longer play in the Sugar Bowl as they had traditionally in the past. They'll now go to Texas to play the winner of the Big 12 in the Champions Bowl every year, providing one of those teams aren't in the 14 playoff. And if they are, the Champions Bowl will take the next highest ranked SEC or Big 12 team. As we mentioned, the ACC signing with the Orange Bowl, so the Big East really the only formerly AQ conference that now's left out in the cold. The Big East is lumped right in there now with the Mountain West Conference and Conference USA. And based on the quality of the football there the last couple of years, and now with the team that was the best team in that conference, West Virginia, bolting for the Big 12, I'm not sure the quality of football in the Big East, based on some of the teams they've added, I'm not sure the quality of football is going to be that much above conferences like the Mountain West and Conference USA. Conference USA is reforming, actually, adding a lot of new teams themselves. Now, in other news, it's sort of college football news, sort of SEC news, maybe a little more on the humorous side, but SEC football fans, if you're out there, what quarterback who has played in the conference over the last few years would you be least surprised to hear this story about? Here is a story. A certain SEC quarterback who is not currently playing in the NFL, was not drafted in the NFL, despite having some good physical tools, is playing up in Canada, in the Canadian Football League for the Montreal Alouettes. This guy is now on the injury list. The Montreal Gazette reporting that he hurt his 2 fingers giving a peace sign while getting off the bus. Not a joke. Who is that guy? Surprise, surprise, that is Steven Garcia, your former quarterback of the South Carolina Gamecocks, who was suspended 5 times during his South Carolina career before Spurrier finally kicked him off the team in October of last year. And Garcia was supposed to be, Pete's giving me a look like, huh? Yeah, how could you hurt your 2 fingers giving a peace sign, getting off a bus? I do not know. But if you told me and you gave me a few minutes to think about it, if you said what quarterback who's played in the SEC in the last 5 years, and you told me that news story, say, who is that guy? I think Steven Garcia would have been as good as I could come up with. And turns out, true, it is Steven Garcia. Now, he was, as many of you know, he's a native Floridian from South Florida, but he was supposed to be the quarterback finally for Steve Spurrier after really dealing with bad quarterback play ever since he's been at South Carolina. Finally, he was going to have a blue-chip guy, Steven Garcia, a 5-star or 4-star guy, depending on which recruiting service you trusted, coming out of high school. And he flashed some potential at times. I think Garcia's biggest issue was he did not like getting hit. Now, he could run sometimes, and he was a big old guy, so he'd put his head down sometimes and run over. He's got a couple of highlights in his career where he ran over guys. I remember him running over former Florida safety Will Hill one time on the goal line. But Garcia, if you hit him hard in the pocket, if you rattled him a little bit, he was not the same for the rest of the game. That was really throughout his career. And in South Carolina, they haven't had much in the way of offensive lines over the last 4 or 5 years, so he was hit a lot. But he never did materialize into that quarterback. A lot of people think of it. Steve Spurrier, go a little off to the side here, but listen, I know that his tenure at South Carolina has really been a success. And South Carolina has been a doormat football program for their entire existence, even when they were part of the ACC. They've never won an SEC title. And he's already the winningest coach in South Carolina history. They had arguably the greatest season in school history last year, blowing out arch rival Clemson and Nebraska to end the season. However, I am shocked growing up watching so much Florida football during the Spurrier era, throughout the 90s. One thing he always had was a great quarterback. And if it wasn't a great quarterback, it was a very good quarterback. And not all those guys were big time coming out of high school. I'm not just talking about the Shane Matthews and Danny Werfels and Rex Grossmans of the world, who are in the SEC record books. All of the guys he had in between. Even the Eric Cressers, the Terry Deans, the Doug Johnsons, the Jesse Palmers. Every single one of those guys were better than anybody he has had at South Carolina. And it's just unusual to me. I'm a little surprised. And he's had some talent at wide receiver. You can't make the argument, well, those wide receivers at Florida, he's had some serious talent. Alshon Jeffrey had Sidney Rice for a while. Kenny McKinley was an excellent receiver at South Carolina. Tragically killed himself, member of the Denver Broncos. But he's had some players at wide receiver, just hasn't been able to find or develop a quarterback. Gamecocks are among the favorites in the SEC East this year. Guy he's going to roll with, Connor Shaw, is a different type of quarterback. He runs around a little bit, throws it all right. He's more careful with the ball than Garcia, won't throw as many interceptions. But you won't see, with Connor Shaw playing, you're not going to see, or at least I don't think you're going to see. I'm very interested to see what Spurrier has to say about it on SEC Media Days here in a couple weeks. I don't think you're going to see the traditional Spurrier offense this year, 5-step drop, throw it down the field. I think it's going to be much like it was the end of last year, sort of some of those plays mixed in with some spread looks, letting Connor Shaw run a little bit. We shall see. We will be broadcasting live from SEC Media Days in a couple of weeks. Steven Garcia making the news. We're about out of time for today. Glad you joined us. Something that I heard, I guess not necessarily sports news, but news that made me smile. Eastbound and Down. Renewed for a 4th season. Kenny Powers. Now, I know the second and third seasons were not nearly as good as the first. Still going to be good to have Kenny Powers on TV for another year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if you've never seen that show, check it out. Eastbound and Down. We'll be back tomorrow at 4 for more of the Social Gambler Radio Hour.